welcome to In the News for July 28th, 2023. I am Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. How's it going, Brett?
It's going good, Jeff. It's another Friday, which means another week to update your iPhone, your iPad, your Mac, your Apple TV, your Apple Watch. We just talked about updates a week ago, and I thought maybe, okay, we're okay. You know, we'll be on the back burner for a couple of weeks. But no, we now have like an official point update. I think this is 16.6, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. You know, I wish I understood the distinction between the last time that you and I talked about it, we were talking about the rapid security updates and how if there's something that's actively being exploited in the wild, Apple can push out this very, very small update to fix the problem. But then this one comes out this week, which is a whole 0.1 update. So you would think it's a more substantive update. And yet there's really no new features. I mean, again, it's just to address security issues that are actively being exploited in the wild. Why does Apple do one with a rapid security update that I can install in like 2 or 3 minutes, and the other one with the 0.1 update that it took me, you know, a good 5 to 10 minutes to install it? It was a little bit longer. I don't really understand the distinction between the two of them. But the important news is always, you know, every update has security issues, so you always should install them. But this one in particular, Apple is saying, hey, there are some bad guys actively taking advantage of flaws, and so you should update it. The warning that I had, and I put this in the beginning of my posts this morning, was that all of my devices updated just fine. My computer, my iPhone, my iPad. But the problem that I had with my Apple Watch, as I mentioned, was that once I installed the update, my battery just started draining so quickly. And I think the solution was I just shut it down. You know, you hold down the button on the big button on the side of your Apple Watch for a few seconds, and that menu comes up, and then there's a power button at the top right. You press that and you can shut it down. And then I just waited a minute or two, and then I started it up again. And that now seems to have solved the problem. Good. So that's good. So, I mean, and again, I found nothing on the internet about anyone else having the problem. So I'm hoping it was isolated, but there was just something about my Series 7 that just had some hiccups with this update, but now it looks like I've got it solved. So anyway.
Well, I think that just means you need a new Apple Watch. Is all.
There you go. Well, there's rumors that they're coming out with new ones this fall. So
I'm here to help you justify a new Apple Watch. But this update, I know, like you said last week, we were talking about it was like 16.5.1 parentheses. It was like a parenthetical update. It was A, then they took that away. They had B. I don't even know if they had B, but then the official release
went out to the wild. It was C.
The official release was parentheses C. Now, since we've had some of those over, and it was all these dot updates, somebody was just, I saw reading somewhere, somebody was saying that, you know, Apple maybe just kind of wrapped all of those, previous updates into this 0.6 update. Obviously, no one knows for sure, but if nothing else, because we know there have been some of those security patches, you know, that were pretty important. We talked about those every time they come out because it is important to update, but there's always going to be people that don't get around to the update, right? Or they just put it off a little bit. And so I think, at least from my perspective, I would like to think, well, Apple puts enough emphasis on it that, okay, hey, all you people, all you laggers, if you're not updating yet, then we're going to push out an official update, right? The 16.6. I mean, they're all official, but in the sense that this is a little bit more important on there.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah. So I just wonder, and again, this is everything. My watch, everything did fine. I had no issues with my watch. In fact, my wife this morning, getting in the car, she was taking my son somewhere, and she's like, "Hey, I see I've got an Apple Watch update. Can I update that in my car?" And I'm like, well, you can, but you know, they like to have the watch on the charger. And she's like, oh, no problem. And she had like her USB, wire charger. So I guess she's going to try to update her Apple Watch while she's in the car driving. I'm like, hey, why not? I mean, try it and let me know how that works. So that's good. So anyway, all the Apple devices that you have, please go and look and see if you have an update. And, by the way, most of these will get pushed eventually automatically, right, Jeff? I don't know exactly how that works because I always see a little, red circle on my settings, and that just bugs me. So I have to go and download an update immediately. But I know that if you don't, that at some point Apple is going to make sure that you do it, while it's overnight or something like that.
Yeah, if you don't take the initiative in the first few days, Apple will eventually start to bug you.
Another couple of stories you linked to, which I thought was great, was the improvements for some of the Apple apps. Let's start with this one here that you linked to from Dan Moren. at Macworld, 3 overlooked Apple apps you should start using right now. And I feel like that's great, Dan. I'm already using those and I've enjoyed all of the updates, but he's got a good point. Dan has a good point here. And that if you haven't looked at maybe the Reminders app in a while or the podcast app, there have been some really nice improvements over the last few months on these apps.
The 3 apps that he talks about, Notes, Reminders, and Apple Podcasts, are all apps that are built in and free, so everybody has them, but they are all apps that there are third-party apps available that have a ton more features. Right. And so that's always the issue is, do you want the additional features that you get with a third-party app, or is the Apple one good enough for you? And within these 3, I mean, I have a difference of opinion. The Apple Podcast app, for example, which has really gotten very good over the years, I still prefer the extra features of the Overcast app, but I do pay attention to Apple Podcasts because they continue to get more and more features. I was looking just before we started to record today, Brett, and I see that looking at like our last 10 episodes of this podcast, just over 50%, about 57% of people use Overcast. And then about 26% of people use Apple Podcasts. Between those two together, it's around, almost 85%. And then everybody else uses a bunch of different things that are just, all together make up 15%. And that doesn't take away, I mean, things like Pocket Cast and Stitcher and Downcast and Spotify. If that's the app that works best for you, fantastic. Use the app that you love. But it sort of gives you that, about half of the people are finding, for at least our podcast, that Overcast gives them the features that they want because it has things like, taking away spaces between words and, good ways to speed up the how make a podcast faster to listen to, things like that. But then Apple Podcast gets better and better. And as Dan points out here, it now has, advanced queue systems and stuff. And I love it when Apple, there's going to always be a gap between the advanced third-party apps, but let's have those built-in apps get a little bit more powerful, a little bit more robust, so that if you want to go with the built-in ones, that they're pretty good. So Apple Podcasts I don't use, but on the other hand, the other 2 he mentions, Notes and Reminders, I love those apps. I mean, they're fantastic. And I really don't use third-party reminder apps and third-party notes apps because they have just gotten so robust. And I'm looking forward to the updates coming in iOS 17 to both of those apps. But, Notes, for example, you'll have the ability to link between different notes. And so you can have one note get you to another note quickly without having to go fumble and find it, and embedded PDFs and stuff. So it's good stuff.
Now, on the Reminders app, Jeff, don't you still use the Things app? Do you use Things a lot? And then in addition, I
use them for different reasons. I use the Things app, which I realize can have some reminder-like functions, but I'm using it to have a list of my to-do items. I consider that different. Whereas Reminder, I know that Reminder has a very much of these the things you need to do, but for me, Reminders is more active. I tell Reminders, hey, so-and-so, remind me at 6 o'clock that I want to do this, or remind me when I get home that I want to, bring in the trash can. I don't even know, whatever it is that you say. I use it for when you get to this time or this place or this ever, have something to do that. The one exception to that is I actually do like using Reminders for a grocery list because it'll show up on the Apple Watch and it works really well. So I admit that, I think of Reminders as a little different than a to-do app, even though they are very close to each other. And I like the fact that Reminders now can have different lists, and you can have sub lists within lists and all that sort of stuff. But and then another thing I'll mention is that for me, I use it's for my work purposes that I am using a to-do app. Here are the work things that I'm going to be doing with Things. Whereas Reminders for me, it's not really work related. It's just sort of personal. Maybe as I'm saying all this out loud, maybe it sounds like an artificial distinction, but in my mind, it's pretty clear where Things stops and where Reminders starts. And they both have equally important, but very different roles for me.
I think I'm mostly with you. Certainly on the podcast, totally with you. And I know that. Like I will go and check the podcast app on my iPhone every once in a while, but always use an Overcast for the vast majority of my podcast. And now it's kind of got my history and everything in there, in my settings and stuff. The Reminders, I've gone back and forth on them over the years. The Reminders app. I used to use it when it first came out. Then I stopped. Honestly, you can see here's a screenshot that Dan has here. I don't like that interface as much. What I use pretty much all the time is Microsoft To Do. That used to be the old Wunderlist or Wunderlist app, from many years ago that Microsoft purchased. And I still like that just because of the simplicity of it. But now that you mention that, Jeff, you're exactly right. I will use the Reminders app to just ask she who shall not be named, to remind me, like when I get back to the house, because it can do geolocation. When I get back to the house, remind me to let the dog out or to check the mail or whatever the case. And those reminders will pop up. And like you said, it even pops up on the Apple Watch as well. So I think you're right on. And then, but lastly, with the notes, let me say this, that there are multiple note-taking apps available on iOS. And the one that always comes to mind as like the biggest use is the Drafts app, right? Drafts from, was it Agile Tortoise, which has been great for many, many years. And I still have it. I haven't gotten rid of it. But I got to tell you, Jeff, I find myself opening the Notes app almost on a daily basis, several times throughout the day, either because it's not so much a shopping list, but it may be something that I want to take a picture of, this wine bottle or this coffee that I tried. And it's like one place where I can collect all of that information, where I just want to capture something, even from like a dictation perspective, right? If I just want to get something out of my brain, I'll just open the Notes app and I'll start dictating on my iPhone. And I have really enjoyed the Notes app more than any of these others, with all of the improvements that it's been making over the last several months.
Another example of how one app might bleed over into another one is just between Notes and Reminders. I mean, Reminders is inherently set up that you have items with little buttons that you click off next to them. Right. One of the things that I keep track of is I have a packing list for whenever I travel on either work or pleasure. Right. And it just has all the things that I want to make sure that I always pack, whether it's clothing or whether it's accessories or electronics. And so the idea is, as I'm packing for every single trip, I look through that list because it helps. Oh yeah, I don't want to forget to bring, a tie, or I don't want to forget to bring, my charger for my Apple Watch or whatever it is. But I actually keep that list in the Notes app. Within the Notes app, you can create a bulleted list. So it looks just like it would look in Reminders. But for me, I don't like literally click off the things. I just sort of look at the list with my brain and with my eyes, and I just sort of scan through it as I'm preparing to pack. And then, every once in a while, I'll be packing for a trip, and you're like, oh, for this trip, I'm going to also need to bring, X, Y, Z, and I'll just add it to the general list. Now, when I go to the beach 3 months from now, that's not going to be relevant because that was something that was for a work trip. But just the idea of seeing every possible thing I might want to remember to, but again, even though that, I guess you could argue that's really more of a reminders function because of the way that it's a list. But I just find that the Notes app works perfectly for that for me. So, as the Notes app gets more robust, there are just more and more things that it can do.
Just a reminder that if you haven't jumped into one of these apps in a while, if you got, 5 minutes, it might be worthwhile to look at. Another article that Dan linked to and you linked to as well, Jeff, that we talked about the Reminders app, the podcast app, and the Notes app. What about the Apple Maps app, which I know we come back and forth, because I know you have said you've gone more almost all Apple Maps, and I still like the Google Maps app. I still have a little bit more confidence in that. And I wonder, like, is that just a personal preference with people? Because I hear, there's lots of people on both sides on there. But all of that aside, for just a quick moment, I cannot disregard the point here from this. This is from the Wall Street Journal. The Apple Maps app has gotten leaps and bounds better than what it ever was. They even say in the subtitle here, Tim Cook once apologized for Apple Maps, but now it is the preferred navigation app for some. And I can't disagree with that.
Yeah, you and I have talked about the differences between the two apps enough that we don't need to go through it again today. But I agree with you that that's the real point of this article, is that, there was a time when Apple Maps app was a joke. It's widely rumored that Apple fired one of its executives because of the Apple Maps app. But and yet now it's actually really, good. And this Wall Street Journal article, it's more anecdotal than anything else. They're just quoting a whole bunch of people that say, hey, I never really used Maps before, but now I really like it. But I think that that's the point. And, and it talks about some of the advantages. Like, I actually think things look prettier in Apple Maps versus Google Maps, but that's style. That's just an aesthetic choice. But that the idea that this article could be written, I think, is a success story in itself for Apple, because it's taken something that was sort of the joke, the laughing point, haha, Apple Maps, in fact, the first paragraph of this article begins by saying the joke used to be if you were late for a party, someone would say, "Oh, haha, were you using Apple Maps to get here?" You know, the only reason that joke works is because people knew that it was lackluster compared to Google Maps. But nowadays, it's not a joke anymore, and that is, and it's the same thing we were talking about with notes and with podcasts and with reminders. That as Apple continues to improve the products over time and stick with it for the long haul, the end result is a pretty good app.
Good stuff on that. We have often talked about Apple's focus on accessibility in a variety of formats. But here maybe is a product from Apple that they didn't necessarily design and intend for accessibility, but I thought John Gruber did an excellent job here. Oh, well, he's linking to a Mastodon article where the AirPods Pro could actually help somebody that may not be completely deaf, for example, but just a little bit hard of hearing. This could be something that you could contemplate. I thought this was a great little article here.
Yeah, there were two things that jumped out at me about this one. First of all is, I mean, the great story that the person that writes the note, Gary Knight, says that he, he's partially deaf, and for years there were things he just did not hear in the outside world anymore. And now that he puts his AirPods in, and he's got it appropriately tuned, he can suddenly hear those things again. I mean, that's wonderful. That's fantastic news. But the second thing that was interesting to me is he describes how you can go into your settings app and then into accessibility. And anyone can do this. If you own a pair of AirPods, put them in your ears, go into the settings app, go into accessibility, go into AirPods, and then go into audio accessibility settings. And Apple will actually walk you through accommodations, and it will play tones. Like, I don't know if you've done it, Brett, but it will say,
I haven't yet. I haven't.
Okay, I'm going to play this, and it's somebody talking really quietly, and it's like, could you hear that? And I was like, yes, I could hear it. And then it says, okay, now we're going to do this, but it's a little different. Can you hear that? Yes. And now it's going to say, here's two sounds. Which one sounds better? And I can tell that one of them is like more treble heavy or bass heavy, but I went through the process, and by answering all the questions about what sounded better for me, the end result was the regular setup is fine for you. But
You're fine.
I know that if I had trouble hearing the whisper voices, or if, the sound that was maybe a little bit more accentuated in the treble or a little bit more accentuated in the bass, maybe if it allowed me to hear something that I otherwise couldn't hear, Apple would say, great, we will change the settings on your AirPods. And so things sound what you consider to be better. Will be good for you. And how awesome is that? I mean, that's really, really cool. So, if for nothing else, just to try it out, we'll go through the steps. It just takes you a few minutes to do. It's sort of fun to go through the process of doing it. And especially if you think that you have some hearing issues, your AirPods might be good enough to compensate for that without having to worry about hearing aids. And John Gruber speculates that, these essentially are hearing aids, but Apple just doesn't want to go through the regulatory process of a medical device and getting FDA approval and everything else. But as long as you don't advertise it as such, I guess there's nothing wrong with including the features. So it's pretty cool.
Absolutely. I am thrilled to see this. And when I first saw this, I thought, well, this sounds similar to when I first got my AirPods Pro, and I wanted to go in, and isn't it, you can set up spatial audio this way, right? And it even tests to make sure that it's got a good seal, or if you need a different ear tip or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Ear tip test. Thank you. And that's great. And so I thought, that's really neat that we could use something like that, because I really thought that AirTip test was like, okay, I just want the best experience possible. But if we can take that one step further and maybe even make sure, can this help me, from a partial hearing loss, or, just even to hear things a little bit better, that's really fantastic. So anyway, I'll make sure that we put the link in the show notes there, but I'm glad that you linked to that. One of the places that I will always have my AirPods Pro with me is on a flight. Jeff, I cannot take a flight now without AirPods Pro. Now, I never had the Bose, sound waves, whatever those are. I just never did that because I still like to hear the pilot when they come on, right? Or I would, if the steward or somebody in my seat next to me says something, I still want to be able to quickly be able to hear them a little bit. But I'm glad that I have that, because on these flights now, I also cannot get on a flight without the Flighty app. We talked about this several months ago. You can get a free version, and you can try the first flight with all the pro bells and whistles for free. But then after that, you got to pay. And I think it's $50 per year, which I got to tell you, Jeff, I have been very happy to pay. And I was thrilled to see this past week that Flighty 3.0 came on the scene with some really nifty little updates.
Yeah, the big feature for Flighty 3.0 is to make it easier to track your friends' flights. Flighty already works great when you're traveling yourself, and it can import your travel plans from TripIt and everything else. But oftentimes, my wife might be traveling to, New York or someplace like that. And I'm, maybe I'm picking up at the airport, or maybe I just want to, know if she has delays and stuff like that. And so I will put her information into Flighty. And so with the new version of the app, it's easier to share, and you can, it has all these little bells and whistles, and you can, I think, even, have different people in there and put it under their person's name and their picture and stuff like that. But as nice as Flighty is for when you're traveling yourself, as you were saying, you use it, Brett, I think the app is just as useful when you have a friend or a colleague or a family member that's traveling and you want to keep dibs on their flight. And so with the new version, the app developer is recognizing that that's just as important of a feature and is giving some extra oomph for that, which is fantastic.
One of the ways that when I would fly and be landing, my wife was going to come pick me up at the airport. I loved that in Flighty, the old version, I could just go to the flight, I tap on it, and then there's a share button. And I had various ways that I could share that with my wife. It could just be a link, for example, or it could be the flight number. But they had like a live tracker option in there. And I just texted that to my wife. And then she could see in real time and track the flight right there with that little live tracker. And so now the fact that she doesn't even have to ask me to share that with her anymore, because I immediately added her as my friend in Flighty. And she loves it. She loves being able to track it. Even if she's not picking me up, she just likes to know, like, when am I landing, when am I getting back, that kind of a thing. And that's really great. I'm thrilled to see this company work in the way it does. All of the other fantastic options there, the fact that it uses the dynamic island, and I could just glance down at my phone to see, how much further the flight has. We talked about this, that even when you get on a plane and you don't pay for the full Wi-Fi, but you can get the free messaging service, the Flighty app works on that free messaging service. So it updates the flight information, and it does it great. I even understand and know where, like, I'm going to pick up a bag. If I check a bag, Flighty will tell me that information before the flight attendant even knows. I could tell them. We're not the only fans of Flighty. They won a Apple Design Award, I think, just a few months ago, right? And just really great stuff. So check out Flighty if you are interested in that. And when you travel, it's almost like another travel session that we're having today, an episode today. But this was a great little item that you linked to, Belkin's new BoostCharge Pro. I like the name of that. It's like a big battery, but you can also charge your Apple Watch on this. Good stuff here.
Yeah, and that's the cool feature. It's a nice battery that looks like it's it's not too big, and it's got rounded sides, so should be easy to carry around with you and stuff. But the one unique feature is it has a place on it where it's got the little puck to charge an Apple Watch, and not just charge it, but it does fast charging. So, if you have an Apple Watch Series 7, which came out last year, or the Series 8, which came out this year, one of the features it has is it can have fast charging. And so if your cord uses USB-C instead of USB, it'll charge a lot faster. And it does make a difference. I mean, I remember doing some tests when I got my Series 7 that the old charger might charge about 5% every 5 minutes, whereas the new charger was charging like 12% every 5 minutes. So if you've just got like 15, 20 minutes to get a quick charge, you can get a heck of a lot more charge on your Apple Watch with the fast charging. And so it's great that that's built in. You don't even need a cord. I mean, you just sit your Apple Watch right on top of this charger and it will give it a boost. I have one issue with the Belkin products, but if you go to the Belkin.com website while I'm talking, you'll see what I'm talking about. Go to Belkin.com and then go into the link to where their chargers are. Belkin loves the name BoostCharge Pro so much that if you go under products and you go under chargers, I think if you just click on the word chargers, I think every single one of their chargers is called BoostCharge Pro. And really the only way to know which one is to which is to look at the features. Like they've got the one that's a stand that they call that you might put on a table. It's called the BoostCharge Pro. They've got the thing that's a puck. That's called the BoostCharge Pro. You've got the battery. They're all called the same thing. So you have to sort of know, I'm talking about the BoostCharge Pro. That's a portable battery that has
even the cables are BoostCharge. This is ridiculous.
They're a little bit too happy with it. It's like they only had the money to trademark one name. Right. So they figured, let's just use it across all of our products. So putting aside,
it's a good name. I like the name, but it's like, okay. It's almost like I want a Coke. What kind of Coke do you want? I want a BoostCharge. What kind of BoostCharge do you want? You have to be specific here. That's crazy.
Today, we're talking about the BoostCharge Pro, which is a standalone battery with the Apple Watch charger.
This one.
As opposed to the Boost Watch Pro, which you sit on your nightstand and has three different chargers on it, whatever. It's a crazy name thing. But regardless of the name silliness, it does look like a nice product for $100. And I think this is the second review I've posted of it. I posted one a couple of weeks ago that John Voorhees and Max Stories had tried it out. And, all the reviews that I've seen have been really good. So if you're looking for a portable charger, this is a nice one, especially if you want something that you especially want to be able to charge your Apple Watch with. I mean, heck, if you only use this to charge your Apple Watch with a 10,000 milliamp battery, it'll probably recharge an Apple Watch. 25 times. A whole bunch. If you're going camping and you just want to take the one charger to charge your Apple Watch, this would do it for a very long time. So it looks like a cool product.
The one downside, or the main downside, that Rikka Altland here at 9 to 5 Toys talked about is the fact that it does cost $100. That's $100 for a battery. Now, because of the fast charging, I understand that. I do trust the Belkin quality, putting aside their naming conventions a little bit. But I got to tell you, before I knew about this, it seems like I'm a little prone to going for generic name devices, Jeff. I'm not sure exactly why, but I found this Rory, RORRY, portable Apple Watch charger on Amazon, and I can see the price is $33 now instead of $100. I think I got it for like $16. I forget what coupon I see. There's even a coupon here, but I don't know if you can see this. I do like the fact it has an Apple Watch charger on top. I do not believe it is a fast charger, so that's a ding. But if you look on the sides, they've got little fly out cords on the side here. One of the cords is Lightning and the other is USB-C. And I kind of like that, because when I saw this that you linked to today, I'm like, that's a fantastic travel charger, right? You can charge your phone and you can charge your iPad and your Apple Watch without having to get the long Apple Watch charging cable, right? The fact that you can just put it on. So I got to tell you, I've used this Rory now for several trips, and I have really enjoyed having that access. But I'm going to look at this Belkin one a little bit more closely, because I really do think, again, it's Belkin. Maybe we should just change the name a little bit from BoostCharge. But anyway, that said, it's
let me mention the Rory one that you linked to, although it's a third of the price, it's a 5,000 milliamp battery, right?
Exactly.
So that's going to be, that'll like top off your iPhone, but it's certainly not going to recharge it. Whereas the 10,000, you could pretty much, you won't necessarily get, from 0 to 100, but you'll probably get from like 0 to 80 or something like that. So just keep in mind, obviously bigger batteries, of course, it also means it's more expensive. It's heavier to carry around. That's a trade-off you're going to always have to weigh.
All good points. It is now time for our Where Ya At segment.
Where ya at?
And today we have a whopper of a segment. I think,
we do.
Did you link to 5 stories?
There was so much to say.
We'll run through these really quick, but they're so good, Jeff. I like this. This one comes from Italy, of all places, which, okay, most people think, well, that's not that big of a deal. But it is, in the sense that this may be some of the first stories we started to see where the Apple has rolled out internationally this SOS via satellite. This was good.
Yeah, the author of this story says that this may be the first time that somebody who got lost in Italy used the iPhone 14 satellite SOS feature. They were hiking, they got lost on a mountain, did not know where they were, and they did not have cell phone coverage, but because of the satellite SOS feature, they were able to call for help and they were rescued. And so, it's sort of a typical story that you hear about. This is how the SOS satellite feature is supposed to work. The real notable thing is this one was in Italy.
A little one closer to home in California, a poor gentleman drove off a cliff 400 feet down. And I think what you mentioned here, he was rescued. It all turns out okay, but he didn't have cell service down 400 feet down on this cliff. And I think the iPhone automatically contacted emergency personnel through the satellite option. Is that correct?
Yeah. And, people talk about with the satellite feature, if you want to use it, and if you're, and if you have the ability to do so, you can sort of move your iPhone around to get the best satellite signal, stuff like that.
Right.
But this is an example of somebody who the iPhone 14, this is only the brand new ones, it sensed that it was in an accident. So we know it has that feature. And we all know that when that happens, it will give you a warning that, it's going to count down for 10 seconds. And unless you do something, it's going to call emergency services, 911. And it tried to do so. but he couldn't do so because there was no cell phone in this in the crevice or wherever he was after he went off the cliff. And so then it switched over, and this is the part I just didn't realize it did this. It was smart enough to switch over to satellite mode, and even though the poor man was trapped in his car, I seriously doubt he was holding up his iPhone. I think it was doing all of this on its own. It was able to lock into a satellite and send the GPS location. Now, when you use the satellite SOS mode, if you're actively using it, you can actually answer a series of questions like, here's the nature of my emergency, here's the situation that I'm in and stuff like that. This man was not doing it at all because he was bleeding and, he was, close to death over here. And so I guess what the iPhone knew is it knew that it was in an accident and it knew its GPS location. And so it sent those two items over SOS. And then it went to the Apple has like these emergency responder places that then connect to a local emergency services like a 911. So they were able to call the local police. The local police got the GPS. And the story is dramatic because the people that rescued him are saying there is no way we would have any idea where this guy was, but for having precise GPS coordinates. Even if he had just called us, he wouldn't be able to tell us that. And because the guy was bleeding out, I mean, how long did he have? And so thank goodness they were able to get the helicopters there and rescue him. I mean, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this guy would not have lived but for his iPhone. I mean, you don't want to be too melodramatic and say you're going to die without an iPhone. But for some people in some situations, that could be true.
From the iPhone 14 and satellite on the West Coast, let's go to the East Coast, South Carolina here. It looks like that this gentleman was stealing from several bars around the area in Myrtle Beach.
Right.
And the people that he kept stealing from finally got smart, and they hid an AirTag so that they could track him down. Is that about the gist of it there?
You got it. You missed my favorite part of the story, which is the name of the restaurant, the Sneaky Beagle. I just love that
Absolutely.
name. And in fact, they live up to their name because I looked at their menu. They'll actually have dog treats as well. So you can bring your dog to the Sneaky Beagle, and you can bring yourself and you can get some good food. But the people at the Sneaky Beagle had been the victim of one burglary after another, and they were sick and tired of it. And so they actually set up a fake safe that they put I don't know why they put a stuffed animal in it, but I guess who knows. And they hid an air tag inside of the stuffed animal, and sure enough, the burglar came back and stole the fake safe. I guess it was a very small safe, and they tracked him down. So the sneaky folks at the Sneaky Beagle were able to catch the bad guy.
Now we can go to the Midwest. This doesn't really have a happy ending, at least maybe not yet. Maybe if they'll see this story, it'll get happier. A gentleman with a motorcycle hid an AirTag under the seat of his motorcycle. The motorcycle was stolen. They were able to track the location of the stolen motorcycle, but it ended up being inside a box truck.
Yeah, I think just a big truck with a big back to it. Yeah.
Yeah, he did the right thing. He called the local police department, and it was the weirdest answer that he got from the police department, Jeff.
Yeah, they said that unless they can actually see the motorcycle in somebody else's possession, that they're not going to do anything about it. I mean, you would think that maybe they could try to get a warrant, but I guess, I mean, is the AirTag not good enough justification for someone to sign a warrant, or did they just not want to go through the trouble? And so this poor guy, he's like, I am pretty darn certain that my stolen motorcycle is right there in the back of that truck.
He can hear it. It's pinging. He knows it's there. He can hear it.
but he can't do anything about it. And he's like, I could knock on the door of all the neighbors, but what are you going to do? Confront somebody, and then they're going to bring out a gun and hurt. So
he's tell people not to do that.
Yeah. So the reason I thought that this story was important is, I mean, we talk about the success stories of the AirTags, but the reality is that even when the AirTags do their job and show you where something is, I mean, the realities of life is you that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to get it. So,
yeah. Well, at least he knows where it is, if nothing else. And if you now, dear listener, after hearing all of our stories today on the Where You At segment, are interested in getting your own AirTags, if you don't have them yet, I always like the fact that you link to this, Jeff. Whenever there's a good sale on the AirTags, the 4-pack of the AirTags is now down to the lowest price I think I have ever seen it, $85. Normally $100 for a 4-pack, $85 on Amazon. That's amazing price.
It's a good price. I checked the service Camel, and I saw in the entire history of the AirTag, there's been like one time that they were right just below 80, and there's been one or two times they were at 80. But again, those sales probably lasted, a short period of time.
Right.
85. The difference in price between 84 and 80. We're just talking about a few dollars. This is realistically about the lowest you're going to see it, and being able to spend not much more than $20 each on an AirTag is a good deal. And again, as we talk about from all these stories, if you don't have AirTags, especially if you travel for your luggage and stuff, I encourage you to get it. Just yesterday, Brett, one of my law partners who actually listens to this podcast, he came in. Hi, David. He came in and said that he had just purchased some AirTags after hearing us talking about it. And we were talking, he and I were chit-chatting about different places to use it. And there's always more. If I bought another set right now, I am sure within 5 minutes, I would have uses for all 4 of those. It's nice and it's useful to have. So if you don't have AirTags yet, get yourself a set of 4 of them, and then put them in your keys, put them in your luggage, put them in your briefcase. Definitely useful.
Funny you say that. I saw this price and I'm thinking, I've used all the 4 that I originally purchased. Maybe I could justify another 4. So I might have to ask my lovely and beautiful wife to see if that could be in the budget for this month. But but on a serious note, that's exactly it. I've used them all because I've put one in her purse. I've got one in my roller bag. I've got one in my briefcase. Like, I've got one in all the things that I know are going to be important. I think I even gave the last one to my daughter for her purse, right? Because you just never know, and it's great to be able to have those on there. All right,
I'll mention one thing, Brett, before we move on, which is that if you don't want to save the money on Amazon, if you want to spend full price at Apple, one advantage is that you can actually put engraving on the AirTags, which is what I did. So for me, I have one on my keychain here that I sort of put my initials on and the number 1. So I know just by looking at it, I can see that this is my number 1 AirTag, and the one that I have on my luggage is my number 3 AirTag. And you don't have to use names and numbers. You can put an emoji of a unicorn or whatever. You can put different symbols on it, but that's one advantage of buying through Apple is you can put a visual indicator on the AirTag just so that you can know it and know which one it is. Whereas if you buy them from Amazon or from any other retailer, they're not going to have any markings on them. So you'll have to sort of hold it up to your iPhone to figure out which one it is.
If you need just a few minutes of fun, Apple has released a new short video. They've done this several times. I remember there was one in China not too long ago, which I thought was really nice. They've done several short little videos, or even I would call them short movies, if you will. They're like little movies, maybe 15 minutes long. This one is down in Mexico, and it features, I forget the exact name, the Mexican wrestlers, with the masks and everything on there. This one is called Huracán Ramirez versus La Piñata Enchilada. I got to tell you, this one was a little weird watching it. But because I'm so interested in the iPhone and how it can be used to make films, Jeff, I was mesmerized at how it would, because I knew the whole thing was shot on the iPhone 14 Pro. And then you even linked to a nice making of the video on here as well. So we'll make sure that the links are in the show notes. But just watching that the whole time thinking, how do they get that shot? How do they get that on an iPhone? How do they do that? And it was amazing. It looks really good. Very colorful movie. So anyway, I absolutely recommend it, even though if you're like me, you're kind of like, what's going on here a little bit? But you got the subtitles and everything. It's really good. But anyway, it's worth a few minutes to watch today.
It is. And it reminded me, one of the things that I like about my iPhone camera, whether I'm taking photos or video, is that it does a pretty good job of color. It's not oversaturated like the Samsung phones, but it does, or some of the other ones, but it actually, it does a really nice job with colors. They look great. And this movie takes that to the extreme, because since it's using very colorful subjects like piñatas and these beautifully covered houses that have different colors painted on the side of them against hills and stuff like that, this little short film is a visual feast, even though it's a little over the top and silly, but I thoroughly enjoyed watching it. It was fun to watch. It's in Spanish, so there's got subtitles if you don't speak Spanish, but it's very easy to understand what's going along. And like you say, Brett, the fact that the entire thing was sat on an iPhone, you will watch shots and you will find yourself thinking, how did they do that? And then you watch the making of video and you're like, oh, that was very clever. I see what they did there. And it's very, very fun.
Good stuff on that. In the know. So today is nice and sunny here in Ohio, and not as much of a smoke cover from our northern cousins. But I have promised my son that today I'm going to smoke some baby back ribs. So I only do this a couple of times every summer, Jeff. It's not very often, but when I do, it's usually like a 4 to 6 hour process, right? Now I don't get into too much crazy because there are some folks online that, you know, they have the works, right? I'm not quite that crazy. I still actually use a Weber kettle grill to do this. So I kind of make it up myself. But one of the things that's important is keeping the temperature inside that kettle grill fairly consistent, like 225, 250, you know, for all of those hours. Well, I don't have a thermometer or anything on that kettle grill because it's a very old kettle grill. So I found Weber's iGrill Mini. Now there's iGrill temperature sensors. I use the iGrill Mini. It's very small. It's about $50 or $60 on here. But I got to tell you, I have thoroughly enjoyed it because instead of me having to like take the lid off and check the temperature ever so often, you know, every other hour or so, I just leave this little thermometer inside my kettle grill, and then it connects by wire to a little sensor on the outside that connects to my iPhone via Bluetooth.
Oh, cool.
And the little iGrill app on my iPhone tells me exactly what the temperature is inside my kettle grill. And so then, you know, I can adjust the little, flames open and close, or add more wood if I need to. There is the iGrill Mini. That's, as I said, it's the one that I use. If you really want to invest a little bit more, you can get the iGrill 3. That's $120, but you can see there's a couple of additional sensor probes there. And I don't know if it's wireless or not, but anyway, the iGrill Mini that I use works on a little CR2023 battery, the same batteries that the AirTags use, right? So I just replace those because I've got a bunch of those because I've got so many AirTags and other things that use them. But this little iGrill Mini just uses that 2023 battery. I just replace that in the back. The little sensor sits outside of my grill while the little thermometer probe sits inside, and then I just check my iPhone and I can make sure that I know what's going on inside that grill. So that's my little gadget tip for the week.
That sounds good. What time should we come over, by the way, Brett?
I know. Well, you better start driving now.
I might want to leave now to get up to Ohio by then. Absolutely. So it takes a long time to smoke, though, so we'll be fine.
It does.
My tip today is something we've talked about in a roundabout way in the past. We've talked in the past about Apple's services and Apple One and Apple News Plus. I wanted to focus on one specific thing because I find it so useful. Okay. Many times when I am reading, when I'm seeing links to articles. Earlier today, for example, in the podcast, you and I were talking about the article and the Wall Street Journal comparing Apple Maps to Google Maps. I don't pay the Wall Street Journal to subscribe to it, but I can read all of those articles because I am a subscriber to Apple News Plus. You can subscribe to Apple News Plus on its own for $10 a month. Or if you do what I do, which is you have the Apple One Premier subscription, I pay $33 a month, and that gets me News Plus and Fitness Plus, in addition to the other core Apple services, Apple Music, Apple TV Plus, Apple Arcade, Apple iCloud. And so for me, that's a bargain for $33 to get all those different things. And so, but it means that, first of all, I can read the Wall Street Journal articles without paying for it. And a Wall Street Journal subscription, it's been a while since I did it. I think it's like $100, $150 a year. I mean, it's a lot on its own. But then additionally, I can read a lot of articles from a Bloomberg Business Week, which is also a very expensive subscription. And I can also read things, every once in a while, I will see a link to an article in the New Yorker or New York Magazine, the Atlantic, Vanity Fair. Like lots of times if I'm watching movies, and stuff, you might want to read about Vanity Fair, about the entertainment stuff, Wired Magazine, and just a whole host of newspapers. I mean, the LA Times and the Houston Chronicle. I mean, tons and tons of newspapers across the country. And so if you're someone like me that enjoys just reading things on the internet, you will often hit these paywalls and be unable to read something. But whenever I hit one of those paywalls, and I'm often on my iPad, but I could be on my iPhone too, when I'm in Safari, I just, I'm at that article and it says, if you want to read past the first sentence, you got to subscribe now. I just hit the little share button at the top right, and then I open it up in the Apple News app. And then once I'm in the News Plus app, once I'm in News Plus, I can read the entire article. And I use this feature so often that even though I've mentioned it in the past on the side, I just wanted to make it the focus of the tip today, because it is a reason, putting aside the other advantages of News Plus, like the fact that you get updates of, news and stuff like that. Heck, just earlier this week, Brett, I saw some crazy story on the front of my iPad that was saying that it was so hot on the coast of Florida that there were areas of the water that were like as hot as a hot tub, like 101 degrees or something something like that. I'm like, oh my goodness. I mean, the world's getting hot. I feel bad for the fish that are in the hot tubs outside of Florida. But anyway, poor manatee and stuff. But aside from just getting regular news updates like you would get from any news service, when you have specific articles that you want to read from premier publications, be they magazines or newspapers, you will often be able to read it without being a subscriber. Not all the time, but often you will be able to read it for some of these big publications in News Plus. And I love that feature so much. I use it all the time.
This link that you sent, I didn't know this existed here. This is literally a listing of all of the publications that you can get from within Apple News Plus. And I knew there was a lot,
There's
but
so many,
oh my goodness, there is a lot in here. In fact, they just added the Dallas Morning News. I can see that's one of the newer ones. That there's men's lifestyle, women's lifestyles, hobbies, home and garden, health. I think just seeing them all in one place like this is really emphasizing to me how useful that this app is. And then just to kind of piggyback on top of that, some of these are news outlets, right? Or some of them are newspapers, but some of them are also what we would think of as print magazines, like the Atlantic or the New Yorker or the Macworld or Popular Mechanics, which we can probably find a lot of these stories online. But if you still like that idea of going to the magazines, I love being able to go into my News Plus app, Jeff, and say, I want to subscribe to Popular Mechanics or the New Yorker. And it will literally download the entire magazine. Now, it's not like flipping pages like in the old kind of style. They've done a very good job in this news app of kind of making it to where you can tap through. It's kind of hard to explain, but it really is kind of mobilized, I guess, more than anything else on that.
Right.
So I'm glad that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff on that. All right, good tips on that as well. Lots of stuff. Good luck on the AirTags, folks, on making your purchase, and sign up for the Apple News. I do the Apple One subscription as well. You convinced me about that many months ago, Jeff, and we can't do without it now. We rely so much on the Apple TV, the News Plus, the Fitness Plus. Really great stuff on that. Okay, I think we're done for this week. Thanks everybody for listening, and Jeff, we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.